Our third speaker is Dr. Marcus Papadopoulos. He's a publisher and also the editor of the Politics First magazine and also an expert on Russian politics. He will be talking about the Azerbaijani-Armenian conflict and unheeded warning from the past. The mic is yours. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to begin by commending the Armenian General Benevolent Union, the Isam Faras Institute, the Lepsius House Potsdam Center for Genocide Studies, and Al-Mayadeen for organizing and hosting today's pertinent conference. Furthermore, I would like to express my profound appreciation to the organizers of this conference for inviting me to speak here today. In 2018, countries across the world commemorated the centenary of the end of the First World War. Yet during those commemorations, few people were aware that under the cover of the Great War, a genocide was perpetrated. A genocide of horrific proportions. A genocide committed against an ancient people who preceded Christ and are referred to in the Holy Bible. A genocide perpetrated against a people who are the heirs to one of the greatest of civilizations in human history. A genocide which resulted in the almost complete eradication of all traces of this ancient people's existence on the land where the mass murder occurred on. A genocide committed against one of the most peaceful and pious of Christian peoples, and indeed of all peoples that exist. And a genocide which stands out from others on account of how powerful states in the world have long sought to suffocate public awareness of it. Accordingly, the Armenian Genocide is one of the most overlooked acts of mass murder in human history. The Armenian Genocide, perpetrated by the Ottoman Empire, which modern-day Turkey is the successor to, resulted in the heinous deaths of in excess of 1.5 million Armenian men, women, and children from 1915 to 1923, and the near eradication of their rich and enlightened culture, which had inhabited Anatolia since ancient times. Today, the Armenian catastrophe is compounded by the stance of Great Britain, which, incessant on preserving its strategic partnership with Turkey, denies the Armenian genocide, making the British state one of the leading and most notorious of all genocide deniers on the international stage. The stance of the British ruling elite on the mass murder of the Armenian people means that the possibility of another genocide being committed against the Armenians cannot be precluded. Given that the British state is one of the most powerful and influential in the international arena, and on account of London's denial of the mass murder of the Armenians, it follows, therefore, that awareness of the Armenian genocide in the West and in the world in general is comparatively low. After all, to underestimate the global reach and influence of British mainstream media, such as the state-owned BBC News, is exceedingly foolhardy. Thus, London's position on the Armenian genocide helps to provide cover to the Armenian people's two mortal enemies, Turkey and Azerbaijan, both of whom are ardently unrepentant for the annihilation of Anatolia's Armenian population. Whilst Britain, as previously mentioned, has a strategic partnership with Turkey, London closely guards its lucrative economic relationship with Baku, which is centered on Azerbaijan's position as a major energy supplier. However, the British state is not alone in denying the Armenian genocide and attempting to downplay the abominable suffering of the Armenian people at the hands of the Turks from 1915 to 1923. The Israeli state is another example of a powerful force in the international arena, which not only refuses to recognize the Armenian genocide, but has also sought to keep the spotlight off the catastrophe that befell the Armenian people, so as to help preserve the strategic partnership which has existed between Israel and Turkey for approximately 4 decades now, and to also maintain Israel's strategic alliance with Azerbaijan, an alliance that grows in intensity year on year. To demonstrate the reprehensible Israeli stance on the Armenian genocide, I will quote a line from an Israeli Foreign Ministry document from 1982. We continue to act to reduce and diminish the Armenian issue to the extent of our ability by every possible means." End of quote. Israel's morally revolting position on the Armenian genocide means that the country stands alongside Britain in being one of the world's main and notorious of genocide deniers. There can be no true memorialization of the mass murder of the Armenians by the Turks without universal awareness of this diabolical chapter in human history. And there can be no way of preventing another mass murder of the Armenian people by either or both the Turks and the Azerbaijanis without universal recognition of the Armenian genocide. Towards the end of 2020, hostilities, though not a full-blown war as a result of the stabilizing force that Russia constitutes in the South Caucasus, erupted between Azerbaijan and Armenia over the disputed region of Nagorno-Karabakh, which was the second time that Baku and Yerevan have fought one another over the aforementioned territory. One of the key factors as to why there was little interest in that fighting from societies globally is by reason of the pitiful and lamentable levels of awareness in the world of the Armenian genocide. Conversely, if global consciousness of the mass murder of the Armenian people during the Great War was at the levels of awareness of other genocides in history, then it is plausible that people in the world would have acquainted themselves with the fighting over Nagorno-Karabakh, and in doing so, would have learned of the terrible menace posed to the Armenians by the Azerbaijanis and their kindred spirit, the Turks. To put it simply, a race who are the victims of a widely known genocide and who are subsequently at war will inevitably attract significant levels of global public attention. Today's strategic alliance between Ankara and Baku is built on the common ethnic, cultural, and spiritual ties between the Turkish and Azerbaijani peoples. That partnership is enhanced by the Turkish and Azerbaijani states' shared loathing of the Armenian people. Such is the inflammatory language emanating on a regular basis from Turkish and Azerbaijani politicians, journalists, and academics about Armenians, that it is conceivable Turkey and Azerbaijan would, if they could, embark on a campaign to replicate the murderous actions of the Ottomans from 1915 to 1923. Azerbaijani enmity towards Armenians predates the year 1988, when tension between the Azerbaijani Soviet Socialist Republic and the Armenian Soviet Socialist Republic over the contested region of Nagorno-Karabakh emerged. For it was in Baku in 1918 when Azerbaijani hatred of the Armenian people truly manifested itself for the first time, resulting in the massacre of 30,000 Armenian men, women, and children in the city by Azerbaijani nationalists who had allied themselves with the Ottomans. Then, in 1920, with the Russian Civil War raging and the Azerbaijan Democratic Republic, ADR, having declared Azerbaijani's independence from Moscow in 1918, the forces of the ADR systematically murdered Armenians living in the city of Shushi in Nagorno-Karabakh. Furthermore, in the final years of the USSR, from 1988 to 1991, when the central and previously all-powerful control of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union began to disintegrate as a consequence of Mikhail Gorbachev's catastrophic policies for the Soviet people of glasnost and perestroika, the Azerbaijanis began a campaign of ethnic cleansing against Armenians living in the Azerbaijani SSR, including murder, expulsion, abduction, and rape, with one of the worst cases having occurred in the city of Kirovabad, today known as Ganja. Finally, during the first war between Azerbaijan and Armenia over Nagorno-Karabakh from 1992 to 1994, the Azerbaijanis again carried out pogroms against Armenians living in what was then the newly independent Azerbaijan, such as the Maraga massacre. Today in Azerbaijan, as has been the case since the country became independent 30 years ago, hate speech towards Armenians is one of the Azerbaijani state's key characteristics. From the president to his ministers to journalists to teachers, Racism towards and hatred of Armenians is ingrained at all levels in Azerbaijan. Thus, Armenians are routinely referred to by Azerbaijani politicians, including the president himself, as infidels, barbarians, animals, dogs, and corrupt, while some politicians have gone even further by calling for the complete elimination of the Armenian race. The result of official sponsoring and espousing of hatred of Armenians in Azerbaijan is that many Azerbaijanis, especially the young, perceive the Armenian people to be barely human, with "death to Armenians" often chanted at political gatherings in Azerbaijani towns and cities. The Turkish state, which, as I said earlier, has a strategic partnership and a cultural and spiritual affinity with Azerbaijan.
Dr. Marcus, I hate to intervene. You have less than 1 minute. If you can, please summarize. Thank you.
I will be very quick. Is also notorious for hate speech aimed at the Armenian people, which includes not only Armenians living in Turkey, such as in Istanbul, but Armenians in general. Suffice to say that whenever there has been an outbreak of hostilities between Azerbaijan and Armenia, or whenever the Turkish security forces have engaged in fighting with the PKK, the Armenian community in Turkey is filled with dread and anxiety over what the physical consequences for them could be at the hands of not only Turkish officials, but also of ordinary Turks who have long been conditioned by the Turkish state to seethe with anger and hatred at merely the very word Armenian. The inciting language emanating from both Baku and Ankara about Armenians passes not only unpunished, but, largely speaking, without notice in the world, including at the United Nations. The primary reason for that deplorable silence is due to the strategic importance attached to Azerbaijan and Turkey by countries such as Britain, America, and Israel. To put it simply, in the eyes of London, Washington, and Tel Aviv, geostrategic politics and economics surpasses morality and ethics. Or to put it another way as concerns Turkey, Britain and America will adopt any course of action which they deem necessary to defend the key NATO member, that is Turkey. Whilst the probability of another genocide being committed against the Armenian people is low on account of how Russia, again a global superpower, is the traditional guardian of Armenians, such a scenario materializing cannot be entirely excluded. So, for instance, if the Russian state was to collapse, and if Russia was to subsequently fragment, as what happened following the Bolshevik Revolution, then this could lead to an outbreak of wars in the historically volatile Caucasus, in which the Azerbaijanis, aided by Turkey, embark on a genocidal campaign against not only Armenians living in Nagorno-Karabakh, but in Armenia itself. In such a scenario, the Armenian people, deprived of their Russian protectors, would be alone in facing the wrath and hatred of the Azerbaijanis and the Turks, with Britain, America, and Israel adopting a stance of indifference to the spilling of Armenian blood. Thus, the Azerbaijani-Armenian conflict constitutes a warning from the past, but one, alas, which is not being heeded in the world. Owing to, for instance, the behaviour of the British state, knowledge of the Armenian genocide, the ethnic cleansing of Armenians by the Azerbaijanis, and the inflammatory language used and espoused by Azerbaijani and Turkish officials towards Armenians is unheard of in most societies across the world. Accordingly, the mass murder and persecution of the Armenian people is a largely untold chapter in human history. For that, states such as the British and Israeli ones deserve the contempt of each and every right-minded man and woman, wherever they may reside in the world. It is abundantly clear, therefore, that the torment and suffering of the Armenian people must be relentlessly and extensively told, while simultaneously confronting and exposing for what they are the genocide deniers of the world, such as the British state. There can be no proper and meaningful memorialization of the abominable crimes committed against the Armenians by the Azerbaijanis and the Turks, unless there is global awareness and recognition of these accursed acts. Until then, the ancient, enlightened, and peaceful people that the Armenians are will remain at risk to another genocide. Our thoughts and prayers should be with the Armenian people. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Dr.